Hello and welcome everyone back to the Adam Hazara Show. We're going live just about now here on YouTube here at 6:30. Today's date is January 3rd, 2025. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. Hopefully you guys are having a great new year and you guys had a great holiday time. I sure did myself. And I'm so glad to be back with you guys today for the first show of a new year. So we got a lot to talk about today. We have a lot to recap with Lake Braddock boys and girls hoop. We're going to go over Lake Braddock's games that they played from December 26th through the 28th, their holiday tournament that they hosted, and we'll also recap the girls' game that they played versus South Lakes on New Year's Eve as part of their holiday game round. And then we will also be previewing the game tomorrow that the Lake Braddock girls basketball team has with Oakton. Stay tomorrow. That game is at 10 a.m. Make sure you guys tune to the Lake Braddock Student Broadcasting YouTube channel to see myself, yours truly, Adam Hazara, to be on the call for that game. Lake Braddock will be going against another very tough Oakton team. So make sure to be on the lookout for that. And finally, before we get into the show, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. It is greatly appreciated. Make sure you also share with a friend and comment. Any questions for a mailbag today's show can be emailed to the show's email over at theadamhazarashow@gmail.com, all lowercase, or you can tag the show on X at Adam Hazara Show, the A in Adam, H in Hazara, and S in Show, all capitalized, with your specific question. So thank you very much for everyone for those questions. Or you could also leave it in the live chat as well if you would like. So it'd be great if you guys could come on and have a little chat and support and show your support. So without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to start off with some boys hoops news today for Lake Braddock. So of course they had the holiday tournament at Lake Braddock, as they hosted every year. They played Heritage Pride from Loudoun County, and they lost the first game of that. Close one. 51-49. Bounced back well by winning their next two versus White Ridge and Battlefield, going away with the title in the consolation game. Heritage team that they faced in the first round, if they lost to, would go on to win the whole thing. So, telling that, the Bruins could have definitely been a team that could have moved on and probably even won that whole thing, and I'll explain here in just a few moments. But, that Heritage game was definitely winnable, only losing by those 2 points. Of course, we saw towards the end of that second quarter, the Bruins were being outpaced by Heritage a lot, and, the Bruins really struggled keeping up with them, which forced them to make some costly turnovers. And interestingly enough, Coach Mitras did not decide to go into timeout when all that was happening. And just think if LB did, and they could have very well kept the lead more often and possibly even won the game. I mean, that was a Heritage team that they were even winning against, at quite a few times in that game. And just think about how the Bruins could have turned the tides in. If they would have moved on, they would have faced the Jefferson team from West Virginia in that tournament. That didn't really show to be that great. And then they probably would have even moved on to face Atlee in the finals, which has been one of the best teams in the whole state of Virginia this year. And talk about an exciting game that Heritage played with them winning double overtime and that layup from Liam Rohn, I think it was, to win it for Heritage. The Bruins could have even probably played well with Atlee being one of the best teams in the state this year. And again, probably could have went on to win the whole thing, especially night, where they overall continue to play well, where, a year where the Bruins have really been revived and there's a new sense of excitement for a team that was really bad, arguably their worst season in history last year, being 3-20. The defense continued to play really well. And, through that whole tournament, it was great too. And Mitras, kudos to him for adjusting well in the Battlefield game, which is where he was being more aggressive with his timeouts, being more vigilant how his players look on a court when they're struggling. If they seem to, like I said, in the Heritage game where they seem to be outpaced or they really aren't getting into a groove, in any facet of their game. And really seems like he recognized those mistakes. He was being aggressive when the Bruins were kind of, it seemed like maybe that they were going into a funk or where, Mitras wanted to make sure that he wanted to get his players a little moment to recuperate and make sure that they were all on the same page with him and tell him, hey, everything's going to be okay. Here's what we're going to do. We have game plan. And, he was being definitely more assertive than he was in that Heritage game. And he did a great job. Definitely being more aggressive in the timeout, especially in the second half, that Battlefield game where Battlefield was playing pretty close with the Bruins throughout the entirety of that contest. And then, really good offensive production, scoring 70 points, which was their season high in that game. Of course, offensively, how we talked about how it's really struggled this season. But back-to-back games, he dropped 65-plus points against White Ridge and that Battlefield team. Ty Clayton, who's continued to been a revolution for his Bruins offense, has had 57 points combined across those two games. Of course, again, against that nice Battlefield team that played defensively hard all game with Blake Braddock. Nate McComb continued to impress on both sides. Nick Tarr continues to be great from free. And, of course, we probably should mention how Xavier Maine, the Bruins' leading scorer over the last few years, it was taking a little bit of a while for him to kind of get on track after coming off the football season where he was first-team All-State. Shout out to him, the William Mary commit at linebacker. He was kind of struggling to begin the season, wasn't really scoring much, but then kind of had his breakout game versus Heritage in the first round, scoring 10-plus, went quiet in that White Ridge game, and actually did not start and came off a bench versus Battlefield. Now, my guess is that Coach Mitras wanted to get Clayton more of a feel of being the lead scorer. I really think that's what the Bruins are going to be going for this season, seeing how much Clayton has done for them offensively. I mean, he's just been a stud. I'm pretty sure he's averaging over 20 points a game this year. And he's pretty much taken over being the lead scorer for a team that has relied on Maine being the lead scorer the last couple of years. And, I think Mitras saw what happened at White Ridge game where Clayton dropped 25 points and he wanted to continue working with that. And, obviously Mitras saw some really good results from that when at those moments earlier in the season when he would run Clayton as a main option offensively. And then he did in that Battlefield game, and all of a sudden he goes out and scores 32 points in a season high for him. He actually had a season high against White Ridge as well, being at 25. So back-to-back nights he had new season highs for amount of points he scored in a single performance in the game. And, when you look at the Bruins offense, of course, Maine, who hasn't really gotten help, he at this point you could probably say that he's not really had to be, the number one scoring option for Bruins, not always their go-to guy. And, we mentioned, Clayton, McComb, they can go to both those guys as well. McComb's been great in the paint, of course. He's been sensational defensively, probably an early candidate to be on the district all-defensive team at the end of a regular season. You have Ty Clayton, who's done a great job, of course, transferring from Rock Creek Academy. Again, as he continues to revolutionize this Bruins offense, he's had a lot of great moments. From what I've watched, great free-point shooter alongside Nick Tarr. Bruins have some really nice, dangerous shooting with Mitras's up-tempo offense that he's kind of gotten back into, and he's really been running throughout his whole coaching career since he's been a Bruins head coach, dating all the way back to 2001, one of the many veteran head coaches in the area in boys basketball. And so, again, he's been getting back to that this year and working well with Clayton. And, that's something that the Bruins should, again, really take into account for the rest of the season, as it seems like having Clayton as main scorer is really the main key to this Bruins offense. And it's really how it's been clicking for an offense that's really struggled a lot throughout the beginning of the season. It's really been their defense winning best games. Like Ash Ketchum says, a best offense is always a good defense. And we've been really seeing that with the Bruins this year. But finally, good strides for them offensively to really improve, scoring a really good amount of points for them versus Battlefield with 70 and then 66, I believe, against White Ridge. And, if Clayton's your main scorer, you should stick with him. Have his offense alongside McComb, of course. And that even if it requires a guy like Maine, who's again been leading scorer in the Bruins the last few years, be relegated to a role if that's what it really comes down to, like we saw in that consolation game against Battlefield. And this is not something I would say you would blame Mitras for not going to Clayton more often. Earlier in the season, from a time that Maine first came back, which was a December 13th game versus Edison, where the Bruins got blown out that game, and then Bruins continue to struggle offensively until probably that second game, that the tournament against White Ridge. They weren't really scoring a lot of close games, playing a lot of thrillers. Didn't really feel like that finally, in those last two games that they played in that tournament versus White Ridge and Battlefield. But Mitras, of course, he's been going to what's been working for him last few years, with Maine, of course, being his leading option. The last couple of years when the Bruins have really struggled, Maine has not really had a lot of big-time scoring options around him. Now, you kind of mentioned, okay, he might have, maybe 22, 23. That was Jamie Kaiser's senior year. But again, he transferred away, went to Bishop Ireton, went to IMG. So you didn't have him, of course, at any point during Maine's Lake Braddock tenure with the boys basketball team. So Maine, was under a lot of pressure to lead the Bruins offense while those years. Not really a lot of help around him for a Bruins team that was really going through a big rebuild. And so now this year, again, it's a different look when you guys have Clayton McComb. And again, Coach Mitras has been trying to make the necessary adjustments to really make it work to try to get those two really more involved. And you really are probably going to see the offense centered well more around them, I would say. Again, he's just been going through what's been working. Again, this is still, even if the Bruins are a lot more improved this year, there's still adjustments that Coach Mitras has had to make the Bruins successful. As they're 5-5 right now. And with that being said, this is actually a team that realistically could be 8-2, or heck, even 9-1, had they played maybe a bit cleaner game in that 53-44 loss to South County back on December 20th, right before winter break. And that game, when you lose by 9 points, it's not too big of a lead. We're going to be worried, about, coming back. Not too big of a lead for an opponent. But again, it's still not the most comfortable. It's somewhere in the middle where it's also not the most, comfortable deficit you would want to be in. It's not like, that'd be like maybe 2 to 5 points, I would say. Again, the Bruins, though, not some, again, struggled offensively that game. Good South County team. But again, for me, if they played a bit cleaner, they could have won that. But, I just want to talk about overall, could just feel that there's a new aura on the bright side that's been brought to the Bruins team. It's a very positive feel, very exciting to watch again with all the thrillers that they've been playing in. Overtime win versus Marshall, of a close game with Heritage. Everyone was on their feet that game, especially the last few seconds when the Bruins tried hitting those threes to try to win the entire thing. You have had some other close contests as well with Robinson, with Thomas Jefferson. Of course, the other games with Oakton and Wakefield earlier in the season. Some solid teams out there from the northern region. The Bruins could have won against. They only lost to Oakton by 3 points, Wakefield by 2. And, with the way that, even though they're 5-5, but, just with that in mind, this shows the Bruins, that shows that they're a very good team this year, in my opinion. Like I said before, they're going to be a team that's going to compete, be in the upper echelon of teams in the region. Now, I think up there you probably have Hayfield, who's great, Edison, who's great. We mentioned South County, how good they are. Woodson, of course, with Chilton, the D1 prospect who's a sophomore, just got an offer from West Virginia recently. And there's also teams like maybe Fairfax who could still be pretty good. They're off to a pretty good start this year. But again, there's teams like West Potomac, Alexandria City who've lost players through transfers to Bishop O'Connell. And so that could give it, a team like Lake Braddock a chance to make more of a name for herself. And with the way Mitras turned this team around, it should probably be in heavy consideration for the District Coach of the Year award. It's uncommon. They see a team turn around from arguably being in the worst season ever, where we went 3-20, to now being a lot better in the blink of an eye, are now seen by a lot of people as one of the upper echelon teams in the region, myself included. And some people probably looking at them to be a dark horse candidate to make the district finals and win a game or two in regionals at minimum. So again, great strides that Coach Mitras has been taking before. But, it's probably been the most interesting time of his career, coming off his worst season. Mitras has done, even though he's done this for a long time, but, I don't think he's been in much more different situation he has in his coaching career than with Lake Braddock, even going back to his coaching days at Hayfield back in the 90s before he was with the Bruins. I don't think he's been in a spot where, he's come, where he's been the head coach of a team for 20 plus years. And all of a sudden he goes out there as head coach of a team that experiences a 3-20 season, worst season that under a 50-year program is probably their all-time head coach, and who's one of the winningest coaches ever in the whole area, and probably the state as well. And then all of a sudden just go out there next season after that and just turn it around, just turn the team around like that and, find the necessary pieces to make the Bruins good again. Usually, they've overall been a pretty consistent team in boys basketball, and they're finally getting back to that this year after a struggle over the last couple of years. So great play overall by Lake Braddock boys basketball. They're keeping their stuff up, which you love to see. And so their next game will actually not be until this coming Wednesday when they face West Springfield. Now, we'll see if that game gets played because, of course, as you guys know, if you guys have been checking the weather, there has been talk of the fact that there is a lot of snow coming in, especially Sunday night. We're supposed to get 6-10 inches the last time I checked. So that could definitely, cancel school for quite a few days. It'll take quite a bit of time for all the snow to melt. That means probably no after-school activities. That includes basketball games for both boys and girls. We'll get into some girls hoops talks in a minute with Lake Braddock. And so we'll see if, Bruins will even play those games now with Lake Braddock and West Springfield. Now, they're only about 2 miles within one another in terms of, location of school and the distance between them. But even so, the county is not just going to make an exception for one or two schools, even though if they're really close to each other. They're going to cancel it for a whole county, of course, because of icy road conditions and the fact that it could be really dangerous for everyone. So that means, maybe you'll see some weekend games get moved to the following week. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Hopefully the snow doesn't prevent that from happening in terms of games being played. Hopefully they play on time, as it can become a real fiasco. Won't always happen, but of course, number one factor when it comes to playing games are player safety and making sure they are safe, including when it comes to the means of their travel and the conditions they have to go through in order to do so, get to the school that they need to be at if they're the away team. In this case, would be West Springfield. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, in terms of the girls' next game, that was actually tomorrow morning, an early game at 10 a.m. So Bruins will be up and at it early as Oakton will be coming to town. Now, I know Fairfax County Public Schools made an announcement a couple of hours ago saying that the game was not, this game was not going to be postponed due to the fact that it was going to be any event before 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, and any events that were going to happen this afternoon or this evening were going to get canceled or postponed. So that's not going to happen. It will just be now. The start time for a game is at 10 a.m. tomorrow again. So the FCPS announcement is not affected by this game. That's a good thing. So, of course, that game will go on as scheduled. So just want to let you guys know that. We will see again if next week's games versus West Springfield and Woodson we postpone again. Hopefully not. So we'll have some good basketball next week. So again, we're going to move on to some girls hoops. They lost to South Lakes at the Christie Winterscott Classic on New Year's Eve. It's probably one of the few times we ever see anyone broadcasting that game besides me, of course. You had Monumental Sports Network over there at the St. James, which is where the Christie Winterscott Classic was being held. They're the network that broadcast the Mystics, Wizards, and Washington Capitals game. So that game was, on their app Monumental Plus. I was watching that game 10:30 that morning. Watched the majority of it until about the final 20 seconds of it. And from, what I can say from watching that game, a pretty devastating loss for the Bruins, and I'll get into that in a minute. But first I want to say that, it was a game where the Bruins were facing an opponent who was really struggling in the Seahawks. They're in a situation right now where they're kind of in that rebuilding phase, and they actually have a new head coach this year, a very young team overall that doesn't really have a lot of talent to be seen. And you thought, this is a game where Lake Braddock could finally pull off a win, insert some momentum for a team that's been really subpar in terms of their production this year. And actually they were winning in that game and doing well in the early going, but then it was some costly turnovers committed in the second half of that game, and some struggles with South Lake's defense cost them that one. I was watching the second half. Bruins really struggled to get by the Seahawks full court press defense, and then South Lakes kind of started to pull away. We're figuring some things out on offense, figuring the Bruins out, and we're managing to take advantage of the Bruins' hiccups and just kind of pull away within the last few seconds of that one, as they ended up winning by a few points. It was a game, and overall, like I said, probably the most devastating loss for Bruins. And it's because, its opponent that you knew that would not blow them out. Again, we say, how both teams are struggling coming in. For the Bruins, they had been blown out every game this year. South Lakes equal on the same level. The Bruins only one win this year versus, that private school for Falls Church Trinity at Meadowview back on December 7th. And then they had a 7-point loss to Marshall on December 10th, which wasn't the biggest loss. And then, you go out there when you are struggling, facing a team in the same boat as you, just as good as you are in terms of skill and talent, which is not very high, have a good start against them in that game, but then falter down the stretch and lose. And with opponents like this, that you at least have a chance to beat them compared to facing, a state contender, which the Bruins have really been facing a lot this season. I mean, they have just as tough of a schedule as probably any state contender out there. I mean, they're facing teams like Chantilly. Now, I know that they're short, I think, on Abigail Goodman, who's their best guard. She's out for a season, but Chantilly's still doing decently well even without her. Robinson, of course, South County, Edison, or Oakton, as they're facing tomorrow. They're facing every one of those state contenders in Oakton tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. With teams far better talent, and you have all legitimate shot at winning a state title. And it's all the Bruins have been facing this season. This game, they caught a break. And, to see him, finally get a break with a team in the same boat as them, South Lakes, and they go out there, blew the chance to me, just feels, that just feels really devastating to see that happen. And again, a game that the Bruins definitely could have won, and they trying to cap off some momentum in the season where they're just really lost and they're just not going anywhere. They're probably not going to get past the first round of districts. They'll probably be the 8th-seeded team in the district tournament this year. They'll go to the playing round of that, and then they'll probably lose to whoever it is they're facing. And then so they're probably not even going to be able to qualify for the regional tournament this year. Mentioned of boys basketball, they actually lost in the district tournament last year. They're probably going to get to regionals this year, it seems like. But again, both teams are kind of switching places this year. Boys are really bad this year. Girls were, and they had some injury problems last year. Sarah Pritz was hurt. Mackenzie Holiday were hurt in that early season collision in that game at Lake Braddock. I believe I want to say it was against Oakton, or it was maybe against Marshall, I believe. But they still, even when they got her back, still struggled. And, at least, you felt like that there's a chance that, they could win those games. And yeah, so the Bruins with that, a lot of people also mention the fact that even if someone like Pacey Magnuson was healthy, she's been injured all year for an ankle injury. Is there any guarantee that Bruins would be better with her in there? And that's a question. I know she's highly regarded by Coach Reed. She was a freshman on varsity last year. But how much help does she give Bruins maybe besides, helping her depth? And Bruins have had a lot of depth problems this year. But let me tell you something. Pacey is not, she's not a Sarah Price Hall player who's going to revolutionize the team in one fell swoop and all of a sudden make him a state contender. And, at least when Lake Braddock, had, players like Pritz, you could go back to the days of Riley Drum, Kira Laskowski, if I mention Skylar Thomas's name, you can do that. Some of these earlier teams that Coach Reed has ran after for Lake Braddock, and even, in the later years, maybe, Sarah Pritz's later years and, in the later half of Coach Reed's tenure here at Lake Braddock so far, you at least could go in a game, having a sense of mind that it could be competitive when they face a good opponent. Even when it was against Robinson, who, Bruins have really struggled against the last about 5 years now. They have not won a game against them since January of 2020 against West Potomac or against a team like maybe a Woodson or a South County who've gotten a lot better over the last couple of years. So, so it's really, that is an interesting question. And, by far, probably the worst team that Coach Reed has had to coach in her Lake Braddock tenure. So she's, obviously she's trying her best right now to string together some wins. Now, probably not going to come again tomorrow because, again, never state contender team like Oakton. Going to cause trouble for the Bruins offensive system, which is mainly through, they shoot a lot of three-pointers, even though they've had a lot of shooting struggles this year, too, along with the depth struggles. We're facing the great defensive guards like Sophie Toole, who's one of the best perimeter defenders in the state. She was second-team All-State as a sophomore last year. You have Brooke Chang as well, who's great, another great junior guard. Bruins, you'll probably see him have to really adjust, tack in the paint more, drive to the rim. You see pick and roll action, and Emma June helping out there. She had a good game versus South Lakes. She's been known to be good defensively as the Bruins big. 5'11" there. Give him some good action there. Give him the best chance against the Cougars. Hopefully you see Emily DePaul continue her hot play. I think she had a double-double in the game versus South Lake. She was a major contributor in that game. She was nailing a lot of her shots. Mackenzie Berger, I know, is doing really well for Bruins. She's actually been kind of one of a few bright spots of the team this year, despite how much Lake Braddock has struggled. She's scored a nice number of points for them on average this year, and definitely is probably a player that Coach Reed is probably looking at to be the Bruins' main piece, this year, next year. She's a junior this year, so they'll still have her back next year, so you'll probably see her get most of the strides next year. But again, I want to shout a few of those players out there doing a great job for Bruins. So we'll see, especially when Pacey Magnuson comes back, we'll see how the Bruins will adjust to having her back. We'll see what they can do. We're probably going to be a lot of adjustments there to try to, get Pacey back into the offense. All the other players have to struggle, adjust as well. There's probably going to have to be change in a lot of the game plans. So again, we will see how that turns out. It will be interesting, in all those aspects. So again, tomorrow, Lake Braddock will be hosting Oakton in girls basketball. Make sure to tune in at 10 a.m. I'll be live on the Lake Braddock Broadcasting YouTube channel, bringing you the play-by-play action per usual. So make sure you tune in. We're just about at the 30-minute mark. Thank you for anyone who's tuned in tonight. I greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Make sure you leave a like. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you comment. Share with a friend. And I will see you guys next time. So thank you so much. I'm just going to get about out of here by now. A good half hour with you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And good luck to Lake Bragg girls basketball tomorrow. Good luck to boys team next week. So see you guys next time on the Adam Hazara Show.